It's 2023, and in case no one's told you, reading is cool. I think it's always been cool. I see so many people posting nowadays about books and reading, and so if you're like not a reader and you're wondering what the deal is, or if you used to be a reader or want to be a reader, today's book is for you. Today's video is for you. Hey, I'm Jess. Welcome to my channel. If you're here today, I'm so excited. I'm going to be talking about books and reading for the first time on here. I would consider reading to honestly be one of my favorite hobbies, but for probably for a minute, for several years I wasn't reading after being a big reader as a child, and then now as an adult I've started reading again. Some people get weird about what being a reader means. Some people think being a reader means you have to read a certain amount of books or read certain books. I really don't think that at all. For me, being a reader is like finding joy in reading and reading for fun when I have the time for it. Granted, I read a lot, but it's just all different for everybody. I hear so many people though who are like, oh, I used to love reading as a kid, or oh, I'd love to read more, or I wish I could find time to read this book. If you find yourself in that boat, totally understand. Been there, I get ya. Today, I want to talk about some things I did or some of my friends have done that are going to help you overcome some of those obstacles. So the first thing, if you want to enter your reading era or become a reading girly, the first step, I think, to all of this is to pick a good starting book. It's got to be a fun one, and it's got to be fun for you. Like For You page, this is For You book. It doesn't have to be like an incredible book, or it should be whatever you want it to be, because the whole point is sometimes we will read books in life, or we will start to read them, but we can never finish them, or we think we should read them, or this will make me sound smart, or whatever. You need to pick a book that will bring you joy. And if you're wondering how to find some, I have a couple different ways of how you're going to find your first book. When I started this whole journey, it was during the pandemic, and I needed a hobby that wasn't looking at the screen. And I was thinking, what did I like to do before we were all glued to our phones? And I was like, as a child, I read constantly. And then I was like, if I'm going to get back into reading, I want to read books, right? But I was like, I don't want to spend any money on this. So I went off of some books I had at home. This is one of my favorite books ever. This is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. He wrote the Percy Jackson series, and so these first 3 books of the series, one of my favorite elementary school teachers read these to us in the 3rd grade. I have very vivid memories of I remember her reading this, and I remember certain scenes or where I was in the school building, so crazy. But I read this when I was a child, and then at age 21 I was reading these books again, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are funny. The character development is so good, the plot is interesting, and I didn't completely remember everything, so it was super good. I'm obsessed with these. It's about a boy named Percy. It is kind of Greek mythology based. He is a demigod, so his mom is human and his dad is a Greek god. He doesn't know that though until he's later in childhood, and that flips his whole life upside down. We meet so many fun characters. It's so crazy. But for me, this is what got me back into reading. Something as simple as reading something I used to love as a kid. So easy. You may want to read Harry Potter again, or I'm trying to think of other popular books. That could be a really good option for you. Another thing I do is I've been able to find book talkers or bookstagram people who have similar taste as myself, and that has really helped me to find books. And I know in the beginning I would go onto my library online and I would look at what's popular. Maybe that's not the best way to find books, but I know for me, I needed to see okay, what's everybody enjoying? What is definitely going to be something fun? And so that was what I would do. I also heard so many people talk about reading Colleen Hoover and that getting them back into reading. As far as her writing goes, I see so many people, I was in a book Facebook group and people would be like, her writing's not even that good. And I'm like, maybe I'm not even here for good writing. I am some of the time, but I would describe Colleen Hoover novels most of the time as soap operas. The craziest things can happen. Her characters have wacky names and wacky lives, and sometimes they're too dramatic for me. Sometimes they're just right. I think they're great for if you're on a plane, a vacation, or if you just your brain doesn't want to think too hard about what you're reading. All of those were a fun time for me. So whatever that first book is that's gonna bring you joy and get you back into being oh wait, I do want to make time for this, that would be step number 1. Once you know what you want to start your journey with, then you want to figure out how you're going to get your books. I'm thinking of ways to get books. I kind of went through it in my head. I was like, okay, physical books, you can buy it, or if you own it, you could borrow it from somebody, you can borrow from a library, and then we also have the option of digital books. And so you can buy a digital book on Kindle or Apple Books, or you can borrow digital books from a library. There's also audiobooks you can buy or borrow, so those are kind of your options. I would say, like, you may already know what you prefer, but I'd also say I think you should kind of try all of it, because at the end of the day, if I could have my way and have a million physical books, I do love physical books, but I don't have unlimited money or storage, so that's kind of why I don't buy a ton of books now. At the time when I was really getting into reading, what I did was I had my iPad for school and I got the app Libby, and I got a library card to my local library. It really didn't make sense for me at the time to get physical books from the library just because COVID craziness, so I read so many books this way. I enjoy it a lot. The screen is still a screen, but for me on my iPad, I don't have email, I don't have text, I don't have TikTok. I do have Instagram, don't really use it on here though. So the point is, I have minimal distractions on here. If you're using a digital reader, you want it to be as much like a reading experience as possible where you can completely unplug. I found out later though that with Libby and Overdrive, two of the like really common library apps, you can send your books, your digital files to an actual Kindle, which is really cool. I got a Kindle a year or two ago. I don't use it all the time. Sometimes I I go through phases of being like, oh, I love this and I don't really care, but I have the most basic version. If you're thinking about getting a Kindle, I can talk more about this in another video, but the most basic version has not ever done me wrong. I have a clear case on it just because it makes it easier for me to grip, but I like how small it is for me, but I make the font really big because my eyesight's bad. But so that is how I often read books. But yeah. Audiobooks, I am so on because I have a hard time sitting still to focus on it, but then if I'm like doing stuff at the same time, I zone out. But like for some people, they love a good audiobook. So audiobooks are a really good option, and at least at my library, often the lines for the audiobooks are shorter than the lines for the digital book you would read. So that's come in handy for me some of the time. And so whatever way you like to read books, no one way is like more valid than the other. It's just about reading and enjoying the books. Once you start to read, something cool I think you'll find is you can like kind of start to figure out like what your go-to genres are or go-to authors. So for me, one author I found from like reading books and other people's recommendations I love Emily Henry. So pretty much anything Emily Henry is like an automatic read for me. I'd say auto buy, but I really don't buy a ton of books. Once you figure out like your favorite genres and authors, I find it's really fun because then when they start having book releases or stuff, you have stuff to look forward to. I could literally talk about Emily Henry and all her books for hours. If you've never read one, I think her books are fabulous. But of her 4 books that came out in the last like 4 years, she has Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, Book Lovers, and Happy Place. And I've heard people say you're either like a beach read book lovers girly or you're a People We Meet on Vacation Happy Place girl. I'm definitely a beach read book lovers girl, but I think they're all fantastic. So as we're kind of figuring out what you like to read, what you're going to start with, how you're going to get your books, I think it's important to like figure out when you're going to read. One of the biggest things people say is like, oh, I don't have time to read, which in life, do we really truly have time for anything? Or like, do we actually have time for everything? Like, I think the matter of having time to read is truly about prioritization and just like how you spend your day. Now, some people are like genuinely busier than others, so that's not to discredit. You may work 3 jobs and this is not at you, but if you are someone who spends half an hour to an hour on TikTok every day, I would venture to say you probably have time to read. That's just my opinion, but I have done a lot of like swapping my screen time for reading time. I also think that it's just like such a good break from life. So when I was in college and I was back in person, but it was like kind of post-COVID, I used to go in the spring and the fall when the weather was nice. Every day I'd be done with classes around 2 or 3 and I'd already like taken a lunch break, but I needed a break between, like I just was hitting that afternoon slump. I would go sit in the hammocks outside and I would read for half an hour, and it was like the best pick-me-up. So I think truly like if you want to read, you don't have to read for half an hour a day or an hour a day. You could read for 10 minutes a day and you can still call yourself a reader. I also used to really love, even now, I love to read before bed because if I'm having a busy day, I'm probably not going to read because, you know, life. But reading before bed always gave me something to look forward to. I have to be careful with that or else I sometimes genuinely wish I could stay up all night. But figure out like when you're gonna read, and if you even want to go as far as like figuring out where you like to read, like if you want to read in your chair or like in your bed before you fall asleep. Like I think having kind of a plan when you start, this sounds kind of extra, but like once you get into reading, it's not even gonna take a second thought. But when you first start, just like any habit you're gonna build, it kind of is like developing a habit or developing a hobby. You kind of gotta figure out what works for you and what you prefer. Now that you're starting to read and you have a time you like to read, and maybe you're even like reading books that get you so excited and you're like, I've got to talk to someone. This was such a crazy book. I have absolutely got to go through the entire plot with somebody. Your next step is to find community. I kind of forced some of my friends who weren't readers to become readers, which, hey, that's totally an option. It worked. And oh my gosh, bless their hearts. They would like listen to me when I was so totally geeking out over books, having such a good time. But like, I found that there's more and more people now who do book clubs, and I think book club is such a cool thing. I've joined one, which I've yet to go in person, but I'm in a GroupMe for a book club in my city, and I've met some of the girls in it at different events. But I think that being in a book club is so cool because it like gives you one to read. Typically you have a month to read it, and then you like have people to discuss with, which is so much fun. Like, the best feeling in the world is when you read a book and you're mentioning to someone and they're like, oh, I've read that too. And you're like, oh, what did you think about this person? Or what did you think about this thing? Or I can't believe she wrote that. That's crazy. So finding community, I think, is like a huge part of what makes reading so much fun, is getting to share it with other people. Same thing too, I've mentioned throughout the video, Bookstagram and BookTok. When you go to like book related social media online, you're gonna find, if you're reading some of the books that are popular, you'll be finding like memes or people talking about stuff, and it's a good time, I think. I really do think that like half the fun is just getting to share the books with other people. Now, if you're like really a reader and you are reading vibes, you are a reader girl, you may want to consider setting a goal for your reading. Truthfully, this isn't really my vibe, but I know a lot of people will be on their like Goodreads. They'll be like, I'm gonna read 10 books this year, 100 books this year, whatever it may be, or I'm gonna read for this many minutes a week. Like, there's different ways you can set goals. Personally, I feel like I set goals in every other area of my life, and setting a reading related goal might actually suck the joy out of it for me, but to each their own. That, I think, is truly up to you. Like every other thing I've mentioned today, it's personal preference. If that would like really kickstart your journey, being like, let's read 10 books this year, I would say totally do it. But if that's gonna bog you down and like not be the vibe, totally disregard that. So just whatever you're feeling. And I think like the last thing I really want to hit home with all of this, if I haven't made it clear enough today, like reading and everything to do with books, like I think it should be fun. If it's not for school or work, if you're truly reading like for the joy of it, it's supposed to be something you enjoy, and it's kind of an escape. Like I talked about reading physical books, if you have this as an outlet to like get away from the screen and just like do something chill like this, I think it's so cool that like books are a way for you to like experience new worlds or other people's lives or something funny. Like, it's so cool. So if you become a casual reader and you read 10 pages a day or 10 pages a week, that is totally cool. And if you're reading like 10 books a month, that's cool too. It's just like really whatever your vibe is. I hope that some of these things are helpful to you. If you are a reader yourself and you have book recommendations, please let me know in the comments. In the future, I would love to do more videos. I keep replacing the word video today with book because I'm so book-minded. But if you would like to see more videos related to books, whether that's reading vlogs or book reviews or books I'm loving this month, let me know in the comments. I'd love to share. But yeah, happy reading to you. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!